Hello and welcome to this newest edition of the Regional Roundup. I'm Gary Smith, joined by my good friend and colleague Colin Kirkwood down in Frostburg State. And all you D2 Super Region 1 fans can rejoice. We had to take last week off just because life in the fast lane got pretty fast. Colin, I believe you were doing every sport available in the fall last week in the period of about a day and a half. And I was in Erie for football. But it's glad to be able to catch back up because there's a lot going on the gridiron in Super Region 1.
Yeah, it was a fantastic week last week. We saw a lot of great games across many conferences, and Mountain East had a great one. PSAC always has a great couple ones, and I'm still paying attention to the GMAC because there's a lot of things going on there, and a team that you and I are both a little bit familiar with that might be creeping into the rankings here.
Well, before we get to that, let's go backwards and talk a little bit about this past weekend. And Colin, you had the privilege of calling probably the biggest game in Super Region 1 last week whenever your Frostburg State Bobcats traveled up to Euclid, Ohio to take on the Notre Dame Falcons. And that game was everything that was advertised from two top 25 programs.
Yeah, it was a fantastic contest. Both teams really came out with a lot of fight, and it looked a lot different than I thought a lot of people were thinking towards the end of the first half, and specifically starting in the first quarter. Frostburg State held the Falcons off the board completely. The defense looked fantastic, and just like that, as soon as the clock hit the second quarter, the Falcons came alive, and they were pushing down the field with a lot of tempo, a no-huddle offense, and perhaps one of the best in-action plays I have seen in D2 in a long time. And we'll have that popped up on the screen here. We'll have a screen grab of that one for you to take a look at that. But Devonair Conliffe made a one-handed catch on the sideline over top of two Bobcat defenders to keep a drive going for them. And I still, when I think about it, I can't believe it. But either way, it was a 2-point game, 23-21. Notre Dame ended up getting the win on that one. It was close. Frostburg State had the ball driving at the end of the game and just unfortunately couldn't get things going after a blocked field goal to get the ball back to keep it in a one-score game. It was just absolutely incredible. It was a fun one to watch.
Well, I tell you what, despite the fact that the Bobcats got the loss, you got to look at historically who won the fight in Rocky 1. It wasn't Rocky. So, I mean, that's to go toe-to-toe with one of the best in Super Region 1 on the road. That's going to be a springboard, I think, for the future for that Bobcat program.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that and they'll keep mind. Everybody will keep note. In Super Region 1, when next year rolls around, when the program's eligible to make the postseason, people will think about that. They'll go back and reference that game the farther, and depends on how great next season goes and all those sort of things. But it's definitely a stock game, and you can definitely start putting stock in this program.
And something else you can put stock in, Colin, is as we talked briefly before we started recording, the standings in the Mountain East Conference has gotten a little more complicated, a little more congested at the top. I'll let you go through those.
Yeah, so at the top of the standings right now, Frostburg State, Notre Dame College, and Charleston are all tied up at the top with one loss apiece, and they've just gone in a circle, really just beating up on each other. Frostburg State beats Charleston, Charleston beats Notre Dame College, and Notre Dame beats Frostburg State. So really, at the end of the day, depending on how the rest of these teams all go throughout the table, there's a chance that you could finish with a three-way tie for this division at the end of the year.
And I tell you what, too, not only conference championship accolades aside, there's a lot to be decided going into the playoff selection because, as we said, Frostburg State not eligible just because they're transitioning still from D3 to D2. But, I mean, Notre Dame and Charleston look like, they could be two teams that are going to throw their hat in the mix for one of those 7 postseason berths.
Yeah, you could be lucky and see the Mountain East Conference get 2 teams in, depending on how things shake down at the end of the year. 2 great one-loss programs that could really make some noise, depending on how far they go in the playoffs. But it's really going to be an interesting thing to watch throughout the rest of the season. And as well, down in the 4th place, we've got a log jam down there as well. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams all tied for the 4th place mark in the conference right now, all sitting at 3-2 in conference play and 3-3 overall.
Now, Colin, of those teams that are stuck at 3-3 in that logjam, do you see any of those possibly sneaking up and maybe playing spoiler for either Frostburg, Notre Dame, or Charleston coming down the stretch?
What I'm looking for is UNC Pembroke. They were a great team, and you look at the box score from the Frostburg State game, for example, and you'll think, well, why are you saying they're a great team? They have one of the better quarterbacks in the entire conference in Josh Jones, and he is fantastic. He suffered an injury in the Frostburg State game, but is back and playing for the Braves. And I'm looking to see if him and his team can really get things together and perhaps take down Notre Dame towards the end of the year, because that is on their schedule, and that will be November 6th, and that will be down in North Carolina. So the Falcons will have to get on the bus, travel down to the Braves, and we'll see what happens there. But I could really see them playing a spoiler, and I'm sure Charleston and FSU will be rooting for them that day.
Well, that kind of finishes up everything right now for the MEC. Let's move over to the PSAC, a conference that I'm well familiar with, and Colin, I know you are as well. And probably the biggest game this past weekend in the conference was Westchester at Shippensburg. And I tell you what, Shippensburg, the I shouldn't say the knock, but the storyline of them for the past couple of years is offense, and yeah, we have a defense sometimes, but
yeah.
They came out against Westchester, a team that suffered a loss early in the year, but a team that was preseason picked 1 or 2. I think they picked 2 in the PSAC East. And Shippensburg holds serve 34-18. And really, they never led. I'm looking at the box score right now. They got out to a 10-0 lead, then 10-3, then 17-3. So really, there was no point in the game except at maybe the beginning of the fourth quarter when Westchester scored to make it 23-18. That there was any kind of the outcome being in doubt. But Shippensburg went right back down a minute and a half later, made it 31-18, and then they kicked a field goal in the final 3 minutes to make it 34-18. But Colin, let's talk about that Shippensburg team. Is this the year that they're going to get both sides of the ball healthy and make a run?
See, I'm not totally sold on this program yet. You look at their early season schedule. Yeah, they're 5-1 to this point, but there's a lot of, I would say, lower caliber teams that they've won over at this point. Not that anything against these programs, but Edinboro known to be more of a lower tier PSAC West side, as well as Clarion, Bloomsburg, not exactly high up on the PSAC East side of things. And when they did take on Shepherd, they really struggled in a 59-27 loss in that one. But still, Westchester, that's a great win for them, and we'll see what's going to happen with them this week because they'll be at Kutztown. So perhaps maybe they'll shine some light on if they're going to be a contender.
Well, and that's going to be a big game this week. We look at the standings over in the PSAC East. Kutztown's first in the East 3-0, but right behind them, Shepherd, Shippensburg, East Stroudsburg, and Westchester, all 2-1. And East Stroudsburg is another team. They pretty good offense, a little suspect on the defense. So, that Kutztown, Shepherd, Shippens, that's going to be a three-way march to the end. And then if you look East Stroudsburg, they're 4-2. Westchester's 4-2. There is some good football being played. And again, we talked to the MEC about playoff positioning. The PSAC has 16 teams, 2 of which are undefeated. And we're going to look at the West standings, Cal U and Slippery Rock 6-0, 3-0. But IUP 3-0 in conference, 4-1, and their only loss was a crossover game earlier in the season. So there are 7 good PSAC teams, and the reality is probably only 2, maybe 3 get in. Yeah.
Yep. It's going to be tough. I can't believe that they have so many good caliber teams this year. Coming out of the gate, after not playing last season, there's a lot of teams that are trying to prove their worth and sneak in towards the end of the year. But it's really going to be difficult to try to sort that out towards the end of the year.
Well, quickly on the west side, things are going to be a lot clearer after this next couple of weeks as Cal, Slippery Rock, and IUP are all going to play each other. So things are going to sort themselves out. And also with the PSAC title game, there's going to be a Cal, Slippery Rock, and IUP having to play a Kutztown, Shepherd, or Shippensburg. So one of those teams will have to get another loss too. So, but again, it's that time of year that it's a crazy time of year because things are so congested in every conference, but things are going to start becoming clearer. And let's talk, speaking of clear, let's clear our minds and go to the Great Midwest Conference because we teased a little bit about a team that we know and love, the Ohio Dominican Tigers? I can't remember what their nickname is. Panthers. I'm looking at their logo with the little paw, and I guessed wrong. But they're probably the cream of the crop over in the Great Midwest.
5-1. They've surged to the top of things, and you look at their schedule, and they've got some pretty fantastic quality games to look at to this point in time. They opened up at home against Shepherd, and they only dropped that contest 35-30. And I've seen a lot of teams play against Shepherd and have a lot different of a result, including Shippensburg, for example, and their loss to them. But still, 35-30 is a good game for them. Then later on September 25th, they went on the road to Indianapolis, and they got a 3-point win, 19-16. To that point, Indianapolis was ranked 19th at that point in time. So that's a quality win for them.
And also, let's not sleep on the Findlay Oilers. That's a team that's been a playoff team the last couple of years. They're 4-2, overall 2-0 in conference. So obviously, whenever they play Ohio Dominican, something's going to give. So Findlay can come up
this week.
That's the tease because after the commercial break, we're going to look at the schedule. But this is another team. With only 7 playoff spots and about 60 teams in the region. Anything at the top, a game like that is going to, go a long way to determine.
A lot of people are going to be watching.
Yeah, and if I mean, if Finley would take that win, then you got Ohio Dominican at 5-2 and Finley at 5-2 overall. So there's a lot left to go. And we're going to quickly before the commercial break, we're going to look at our good friends over in the Northeast 10 as they are the final conference in Super Region 1. And Colin, every week it seems like someone's putting up a big amount of numbers over in the Northeast 10. For example, this past weekend, New Haven put up 56 over to St. Anselm 7. Bentley continues their good season, 26-0 over Pace, and then Stonehill 25-0 over American International. As we look over at the standings, Colin, we've been on repeat most of the season. Bentley 6-0, and then New Haven coming up to the top 4-1. Who do you have coming out of the Northeast 10 right now if you had to pick?
I mean, I don't know how you can't not look at Bentley. I mean, they're having a great year so far for them, and a lot of people are really starting to look at them as a contender perhaps coming out of that NE10 to really maybe threaten somebody. I'm sure they'll probably end up, if they run the table, perhaps hosting a first-round game depending on where they get seated in that Super Region 1. But, I mean, that's not an easy trip for any of these conferences to have to make the whole way up to the northeastern part of the United States. I mean, you've done it. I've done it. We've done it a couple of times here. It's not an easy trip. There's a lot of time in the car, on the bus, whatever you want to say, and it makes it hard for preparation.
Well, you figure, I mean, that's at least from Western Pennsylvania, it's probably a 14-hour ride. From Ohio, it's probably 16, 17. From most points in the MEC, it's probably 16 or 17. About the closest one would be a Westchester, East Stroudsburg, and that's still probably a 6-hour drive. But don't sleep on New Haven. They're 4-1 overall, 3-0 in conference. And again, that's going to be something that's going to take care of themselves. But a lot of teams are starting to identify themselves as contenders and not pretenders. And after this commercial break, Colin and I will talk about the contenders for games of the week this coming week.
Election Day, November 2nd, 2021 is just around the corner. Check your status or find your polling place. Visit calu.edu/vote to find links to all this information. Check out this non-partisan website, vote411.org, put together by the League of Women Voters to preview your ballot so you can know what's on it ahead of time. The last day to register to vote in the state of PA is October 18th, 2021, and the last day to request a mail-in or absentee ballot is October 26th, 2021.
Hey Johnny, why do you look so sad?
Well, no, I'm not sure how my friends and family back in Gibbon Glade, Pennsylvania can keep track of all our CUTV programming when they can't watch.
Well, Johnny, they could subscribe to our new CUTV and Friends podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Hey, thanks, Noel!
And welcome back to the Regional Roundup. Colin Kirkwood, he's on that side of the screen. I'm Gary Smith. I'm on this side of the screen. And Colin, it's time to look ahead at this upcoming week's schedule. And you have a few dandies over there in the Mountain East this week.
Yeah, it's really going to be one worth watching. Fairmont State and West Liberty will go at it at 1 p.m. this week, and that's always a good one. West Liberty and Fairmont State, both part of that jumble for the fourth place in the standings in the Mountain East, so I'll definitely be keeping a look at that one. And UNC Pembroke will travel over to Institute, West Virginia. Yellow Jackets are going to open their first turf game at home since everything got renovated, so it's exciting for them. They'll have a night game at home as they've been playing in Charleston for their home games throughout this season, so good for them. They'll enjoy that one. At 2 p.m., of course, we'll have Wheeling here at Bobcat Stadium. Wheeling, a rather new program. I mean, just learning the history of them this week. I mean, they had a JV season, and just like that in 2021, they're off and running, having their best season ever with 3 wins. I mean, good for them, but still, we'll see if they can play spoiler here, perhaps. You never know.
And that'd be a good comeback game for Frostburg to see just, after a tough loss on the road to see what they can do to hold serve. But definitely keep track of some of these games in the MEC. Now, moving over to the PSAC, I'm going to quote Forrest Gump. I'm not a smart man, but I know what a big game is. And at 1 o'clock in Slippery Rock, PA, IEP and Slippery Rock will do battle. That's going to go a long way to determine what happens in the PSAC West. But, Colin, we've seen Slippery Rock the last couple of weeks pretty much blow up the scoreboard. IEP's always been a team that, a little bit more conservative on offense, but what are you expecting of that one?
I mean, Slippery Rock, they are just trying to be as dominant as they possibly can here just to prove that, hey, we're the top dogs in the area. And it's going to be tough when you have to go up against us, especially if we're at home. So, I mean, it's just going to be a real interesting to watch both of these historic rivals go back at it this year for the first time in what, two and a half years, we'll say, something like that.
Yeah, it's been a long time with the COVID year off last year, but that's always probably the biggest rivalry in Super Region 1, at least the biggest game. But don't sleep on the other big game in the conference this week, Shippensburg traveling to Kutztown. We just talked about Shippensburg with the big win last week against Westchester, but Kutztown having a great season of their own, and they have a very good home field advantage at Andre Reed Stadium in Kutztown, and we saw that firsthand a few years ago that it's a little bit different there whenever you got that home side going in full throat.
Yeah, they really packed those stands in over there in Kutztown, PA. It's a nice little college town if you've never been before. It just seems like the quintessential environment to have a great team like that. And they're back in the top 25 this week on the AFCA side of things. Snuck in at number 25 after Frostburg State dropped out. So they'll have a lot to play for this week.
Yeah, if you're out there in the Kutztown area, get yourself a bag of Middlesworth potato chips. Turn it upside down.
Yes.
Get yourself a Coke and a hot dog and enjoy the game. And I'd be remiss if I didn't promote the Cal U game. You teased it a little bit in the first segment. There's a little contest going on in the GMAC that may have some playoff implications.
Findlay at Ohio Dominican, and that'll be a noon kickoff from Columbus, Ohio. That's going to be a great one with two really historic teams in that conference. Ohio Dominican, we've seen them really surge onto the scene in the past couple of years. And like you said, Findlay's been a perennial contender year in and year out. So that'll be important for this conference to see who's really going to hammer out and be number one, perhaps.
Yeah, that's probably going to be a game that, like you said, it's going to determine who's number one. But, one of these teams will most likely, unless the bottom falls out, will get in the playoffs. But, with a good effort, you could see two maybe sneak in. As you think I'm stuttering because I'm trying to navigate the Northeast 10 Conference webpage, which is not the easiest webpage on God's
earth. Yeah, it's not easy
to navigate. But Bentley, the top dog, had to change the time to 2 o'clock. They will be traveling to Southern Connecticut State. And then probably the other big game in New Haven against American International. I mean, there's not really a top matchup that stands out, but you got to look at Bentley New Haven because if they can hold serve, they are going to be continuing on that path to that one-on-one matchup to probably determine who's number one in the Northeast 10. But Colin, let's talk about the polls. A couple of Super Region teams are in the AFCA poll this week. The number one team still in terms of Super Region 1, Slippery Rock, clocking in at 6th place. They stayed at 6th. And if you scroll down a little bit more, Cal U moved up to 13th with that win at Gannon. That was an impressive win. Noah Mitchell over 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, and got the run game a little bit healthy. Then Notre Dame moved up to 14th with that win against Frostburg State. Then Shepherd at 15th. Bowie State, even though they're not in the region, they're in Maryland. They're 16th. So a lot of good football being played in this part of the country. And then if you go down to 25th, Kutztown, they're 5-1. They just moved in. But lurking right there, other receiving votes, IUP, Frostburg, Shippensburg's down there, Ohio Dominican. So there's probably about 10 or 11 teams that are sniffing around the top 25.
Yeah, it always makes it really difficult at this time of year because you'll see some teams that perhaps might be higher than other teams, and you might question why they think that. But, I mean, they obviously know a lot about what's going on over there at AFCA, and sometimes I've seen a lot of people question rankings before. I really think it's tough to try to break some of these teams up, like Notre Dame hanging around at 14, for example. The Falcons, I mean, they did look good last week, but they definitely look beatable. I think if you come with the right game plan and both of your lines stand tough on the defensive and offensive side, I think you can have a good day against them.
And one of the hardest things, and this is for fans that may not be as indoctrinated in D2 football as we are, it's so tough to get a true national ranking because there's just not a lot of interdivisional or inter-region matchups. Really, the rankings you want to look at are going to come out in the next, I think, 2 weeks would be the regional rankings. So that's really the ones that are important because those are the ones that get you the D2 playoff berth. But the national rankings are good to talk about. It gives us something to talk about, but it's just so tough. It's so tough because you got coaches voting that may not have seen the teams in Texas or Texas teams not seeing the PSAC or the MEC. That's why we're here trying to sift through all the data to let you know what's important. But Colin, we're at the end of our time. Just tell us again where you're going to be at Saturday. I know you teased it a little bit before, but we want people to listen to you in the western panhandle of Maryland. Is that what we're calling it? The Allegheny Mountains?
Sure. Yeah, we'll go with that. But Bobcat Stadium at 2 p.m. I'm going to be here all day on Saturday. Field hockey at 11, 2 soccer games following that. So I'll be comfy here at Bobcat Stadium all day. But 2 p.m. against the Wheeling Cardinals here from Bobcat Stadium. It's going to be a good one. And you can catch that on MEC TV from the Frostburg portal. Or if you like audio, you can catch it live via 99.5 WDZN's website, whatever you prefer.
And if you're crossing Frostburg on I-68 this weekend, please, for the love of goodness, take Colin a sandwich and a Coke or something to get him through that day.
Yeah.
It's a long day. Here at CUTV, we have a busy week and not quite that busy at one location. We have volleyball Friday and then a volleyball football doubleheader on Saturday. The volleyball game is 6 o'clock on Friday and then noon Saturday, and then Cal Clarion at 4 p.m. But that's the end of the time. For Colin Kirkwood, I'm Gary Smith. We'll see you next week on the Regional Roundup.